Have you ever felt like a heavy, completely unexplained sense of guilt? Or maybe you have this lingering, frustrating struggle to build truly close relationships, and you have absolutely no idea where those feelings even come from.
Right, like you look at your life, you look at your circumstances,
Yeah.
and there is just no logical, rational reason for you to feel that way.
Exactly. Welcome to today's deep dive. I'm your host, and today we are looking at a really fascinating psychological exploration into intergenerational trauma. We're getting into family secrets, and most importantly, how to finally let go of that self-blame.
And I'm here to provide the clinical perspective on this because, it's an incredibly isolating experience. When you feel that kind of ambient weight, it feels like a fundamental flaw in your own character. I mean, you start to internalize
Yeah,
it.
think, what is wrong with me?
Right. Exactly. Why is it so hard for me to just connect with people or to just feel okay on a normal Tuesday afternoon?
Hmm.
But what we're synthesizing today shifts that perspective entirely.
Right.
It moves us from what is wrong with me to what happened in my family's history.
Which is such a profound shift in how we view mental health.
It really is. Because when you're trapped in that cycle of unexplained suffering, you're only looking inward. You're putting your own perceived failures under a microscope. But the material we're diving into today offers a completely different lens.
So the mission for this dump dive is to map out exactly how those hidden family histories create these invisible walls between people.
We want to trace the emotional relay race that gets passed down through generations.
Right, and ultimately provide you with the tools to break that cycle. Because honestly, reading through all this research, the best way I can describe the feeling is that it's like you're walking in the dark with a 90-pound backpack that you don't ever remember putting on.
That is the perfect analogy. You feel the weight, your shoulders are aching, but you have literally no memory of packing the bag.
Yeah.
And so, to understand where that weight comes from, we first have to understand the actual mechanism of a secret within a family system. A lot of the psychological literature we reviewed emphasizes that secrets are fundamentally about survival.
Right, because, I mean, we all have secrets, but a family secret is a completely different beast. We aren't talking about hiding the fact that you scratched the family car 10 years ago and, like, blamed it on a shopping cart.
No, not at all. If we look at the core of this, a secret in its most basic definition is information intentionally hidden to protect someone from a disadvantage. It's a defense mechanism, basically.
Okay, so it's protective.
Right. But when a secret gets trapped in the closed, intimate system of a family, a place that is neurologically supposed to be your secure base, it begins to severely distort the relationships within that space.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and the most profound, damaging family secrets almost always revolve around core human themes, birth, death, or sex.
Things that touch the absolute root of human existence.
Exactly. And because the subject matter is so foundational, the secret itself takes on a tremendous gravity.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the sources mention there are 3 very specific features that major family secrets share.
Yes, there are.
So first, there is a strict, willful refusal to tell. The person holding the secret has made a rigid, conscious decision that this information will not see the light of day.
And that refusal requires immense cognitive energy. It's exhausting. Which brings us to the second feature, where that energy spills over into the environment. It's this unspoken pressure.
Like an atmosphere.
Exactly. It's a sort of atmospheric control that forbids anyone else from even trying to know. It's an invisible boundary, essentially a prohibition of knowing.
It makes me think of an analogy. It's like, imagine a family living in a house with a giant, gaping, invisible sinkhole right in the middle of the living room.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, like everyone in the family carefully walks around it, they hug the walls to get to the kitchen, but no one is allowed to ever acknowledge that the sinkhole is actually there.
Right. You just pretend the floor is totally fine.
Exactly. And as a result, communication in that house becomes entirely superficial. I mean, you can't have a real vulnerable conversation with your parents if you're constantly terrified of falling into an invisible pit.
And because no one can talk about the pit, they can't talk about anything deeply meaningful. So the third feature explains why that boundary is so fiercely guarded. And that is that the secret is intimately connected to unbearable pain.
The original event was just that bad.
Yeah, it was so traumatic, so deeply agonizing, that hiding it felt like the only way to survive. But the contradiction here is what makes it so exhausting for everyone in the house.
How so?
Well, on one hand, the secret holder is using all their psychological strength to maintain this rigid concealment. But on the other hand, carrying a secret of that magnitude is agonizing. Subconsciously, they desperately want relief.
So they leak clues. They don't mean to, but the pressure just builds up too much.
They do, yeah. It might be a sudden, disproportionate emotional reaction to a mundane movie, or maybe a strange, incredibly tense silence on a specific holiday.
So confusing for everyone else.
Highly confusing. It creates a whiplash effect for the family. You experience this sudden exposure of raw, terrifying emotion from a parent, followed immediately by a slamming shut of the emotional door. It is incredibly destabilizing.
Man, if the adults are exhausted by tiptoeing around this invisible living room sinkhole, we have to ask what happens to the most vulnerable people in that environment. I mean, how does a highly sensitive, completely dependent child survive in a house with that kind of emotional whiplash?
That's the crux of it. Children are essentially emotional radar dishes. Their very survival depends entirely on their caregivers, so their nervous systems are exquisitely tuned to the emotional weather of the house.
They pick up on everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
They instinctually read the tension. They sense the unsaid words, the sudden freezing of a parent's posture, the dilated pupils when a certain topic is breached.
And what a child learns very quickly is that playing the role of the ignorant child is their absolute best survival strategy.
Precisely. If the parent needs the sinkhole to be invisible, the child will pretend they don't even know what a hole is.
Because pointing out the hole makes the parent unstable.
And an unstable parent is a life-threatening scenario for a toddler. But the cost of that adaptation is immense.
What happens to them?
Well, by suppressing their own natural curiosity, by swallowing their own questions and overriding their own sensory input, the child inadvertently becomes a co-conspirator. They become an accomplice in maintaining the family line.
Wow. Some of the clinical case studies we looked at even mention that children will actively cover for their parents' unnatural behavior.
Absolutely.
Like they will make excuses to outsiders or intentionally distract their siblings to act as a buffer just to protect the parents' fragile reality.
We really have to look at the long-term impact of that behavior. When a child is constantly overriding their own perception, seeing the tension, but forcing themselves to act like everything is perfectly fine, it chips away at their dignity and their reality testing skills.
It has to.
It creates profound attachment issues. They grow up believing that love means constantly catering to the shifting, unspoken moods of others. They learn that their own authentic feelings are dangerous, or that they have no inherent worth outside of managing someone else's pain.
Wait, I have to challenge this a bit, though. I understand the survival mechanism. Stay quiet, keep the peace, manage the parents' emotions. But survival is a logical, adaptive choice. How does keeping quiet as a kid mutate into, I am a fundamentally broken, bad person 20 years later?
That's a really great question.
It just feels like a massive leap to go from self-preservation to deep self-loathing.
It does seem like a leap, but it comes down to the mechanism of silence itself, combined with how a child's brain develops. Think about childhood egocentrism.
Like how kids think the whole world is about them.
Exactly. A child fundamentally believes the world revolves around them. If there's a terrifying, unspoken tension in the house, and the adults refuse to explain what the problem is, the child naturally assumes they are the problem.
Oh, because they don't have the worldly context to blame the economy or a historical trauma or like a complicated marriage?
Right. Because the truth isn't spoken, the child steps in to fill the void of information, to make sense of the family's fractured reality, and to maintain the vital illusion that their parents are good, safe, and capable. The child internalizes the badness.
That makes so much sense.
The subconscious logic is basically, the house is sad, no one will tell me why, therefore I must be the cause of the sadness.
So they literally take on the guilt of a crime they never committed, just to make a chaotic world feel predictable.
Yeah.
That is heartbreaking. But it leads us to the next massive piece of this puzzle. How does this dynamic survive long enough to affect people who don't even know the secret exists? How does it jump from one generation to the next?
Mapping this out is crucial for understanding why you might be feeling the way you do today. Let's trace it across 3 generations. We start with the first generation, the grandparents, or perhaps great-grandparents.
Okay.
These are the individuals who face severe, undeniable trauma. We are talking about surviving a world war, extreme poverty, displacement, or a sudden devastating loss like the death of a child.
And back then, in the 1940s or 50s, there was no trauma-informed therapy. There was no time for processing. To survive, their primary defense mechanism was to completely disconnect their emotions from the facts of what happened.
They had to.
They put the memories in a steel box in their mind, welded it shut, and went to work the next day. But because they lacked the luxury to process that trauma, those suppressed emotions didn't just evaporate, did they?
No, they didn't. They solidified into this incredibly heavy physical weight, a weight they carried silently. But their nervous systems were still fundamentally altered. Then we move to the second generation, the parents. They grow up in the shadow of the first generation. They sense this untouchable, radiating wound in their parents.
Yeah, they see dad get a terrifying, distant look in his eye if a door slams too loud, or mom become inexplicably withdrawn every year in late October.
Exactly. The parents are living with the sinkhole. And because they love their parents and sense their profound fragility, the second generation swallows their
They
questions.
just accommodate it.
They avoid making waves to keep the family balanced. They know there is a secret. They know there is pain. And they learn that the absolute rule of the house is silence. They become the managers of the first generation's unexpressed grief.
Which drops the baton right into our laps. The third generation, us.
Precisely.
By the time this emotional environment is passed down to us, the historical context is completely gone. We don't know about the war or the extreme poverty or the specific tragedy. We are just handed this heavy atmosphere and absolutely nothing else.
What's fascinating here, if we step back, is the ultimate cruelty of intergenerational trauma.
Yeah.
Think about it. The first generation suffered the actual event. The second generation suffered the silence and the chaotic parenting around the event. But the third generation suffers profoundly without having any idea why they are suffering.
Wow.
This contextless trauma manifests in very real, tangible ways.
Like the research highlights things like unexplained chronic physical ailments, severe learning difficulties, or just this crushing ambient despair that you can't tie to anything in your actual life.
Exactly.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. I was thinking it's like inheriting a locked safe from your grandparents. But instead of treasure, it just emits this low-frequency hum that gives everyone in the house a migraine and nobody even has the key.
I love that.
Yeah.
And because you don't have the key and you've lived with it your whole life, you assume the hum is just the normal sound of the universe.
Yeah.
You don't even realize other families have quiet living rooms. You are reacting to a historical frequency, but you think the migraine is a personal failing.
So if we are the third generation holding this humming safe, how do we begin to stop the noise? I mean, how do we uncover the truth without just blowing the safe wide open and destroying the house?
The psychological roadmap for this is very clear, and it starts with how you approach the second generation, your parents.
Right.
The instinct might be to go to them with anger, to demand answers. Like, why didn't you tell me? Why is our family so messed up?
Right, because if you accuse them, they will just reinforce the safe. You can't attack them with interrogations because if we remember the relay race, they are victims too.
Exactly.
They didn't build the safe, they just polished it and kept it quiet because they were terrified of it.
If you attack them, their defense mechanisms will immediately lock down. Instead, the approach has to be side-by-side empathy. You approach them on the exact same level.
What does that sound like?
You ask questions like, how did it feel for you growing up in that unique family atmosphere? You invite them to share the emotional experience, rather than demanding factual data about the secret itself.
So it's about connecting over the shared hum of the safe, rather than demanding they crack the combination for you right then and there.
Beautifully put. And while you are having these conversations, or even just observing your family dynamics at the next holiday gathering, you can start spotting the oddities. You're looking for the camouflage.
Camouflage is the perfect word for it. You're looking for unnatural taboos, or bizarre family traditions that no one can rationally explain.
Or those stories your parents repeat over and over again, but with an excessive, almost theatrical amount of emotion.
Yes. The literature suggests that these hyper-emotional repeated stories might actually be altered memories. They are distraction techniques created by defense mechanisms to cover up the real, more painful truth.
The overtelling of a specific safe story is a classic misdirection from the unspeakable secret.
That is so interesting.
And as you gather these observations, the most powerful tool you can use is creating a genogram.
Which is essentially an in-depth psychological family tree, but you aren't just mapping out who married whom and what year they were born, you are looking for the blanks.
Exactly. You map out the relationships, the dates, the geography, and you look for where the information suddenly, inexplicably stops.
Like a dead end.
Right. You look at the tree and realize, wait, my grandfather's brother died when my dad was 8, and my dad has literally never mentioned his name. What happens to an 8-year-old who is forced to act like his uncle never existed?
You find the missing sibling, the unspoken ex-spouse, the relative who was completely alienated for reasons no one will ever clarify.
And when you visualize it on paper, drawing the lines and the cutoffs, you can actually see the vectors of these hidden family emotions. You can see the physical gaps where the secrets live.
There is this incredible quote from the French psychiatrist Serge Tisseron that kept coming up in the reading. He says, "Children only take a strong interest in their parents' lives when they feel responsible for it."
That quote is the crux of the entire issue we are discussing today.
Because the very act of sitting down, making a psychological family tree, and trying to untangle decades of history just to figure out why you feel guilty on a Tuesday shows exactly how much inappropriate responsibility you were carrying.
It really does. But I want to anticipate a completely natural fear that arises here.
Okay, what's that?
If we go digging for these blanks, if we start analyzing strange family traditions and mapping out missing relatives, aren't we just playing amateur detective?
Yeah, let me play devil's advocate here. Why poke the bear? If the trauma is buried, aren't we just stirring up unnecessary pain for everyone by digging it up?
It's a really valid pushback,
Uh-huh.
but we have to reframe what we're actually doing. You are not finding the blanks to play true crime detective so you can point a finger and blame a culprit.
Okay.
Creating a genogram and tracing this history is a vital psychological ritual.
So by doing this, it's almost like a ritual of proof. You're mapping it out not to accuse your parents, but to prove to your own brain that this timeline started way before you were even a thought.
That is exactly the mechanism. You are identifying the true source of the responsibility you have been carrying.
Wow.
By mapping it out, you physically prove to your own nervous system that the burden, the guilt, the fear of intimacy, the heavy atmosphere originated decades before you were born. You are tracing it back to prove, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that the burden was never yours to begin with.
You aren't looking for someone to punish. You are looking for permission to drop the weight. You are returning the emotional baggage to its rightful place in history.
You are handing it back to the timeline. And when you do that, you realize the child who assumed they were the monster just to make sense of the silence they were just trying to survive.
And that brings us to the ultimate takeaway for you, the listener, today. If you take away nothing else from this deep dive, hear this. That unexplained heaviness, that lingering guilt, it is not your fault.
It never was.
And dropping a burden that belongs to the first generation, letting go of that inherited safe that isn't abandoning your family.
No, not at all.
I know it can feel like a deep betrayal to stop carrying the family weight, but it isn't. It is the necessary first step to establishing healthy boundaries. It is how you achieve true independence. I mean, you cannot live your own life. You cannot form your own deep relationships if you are entirely consumed by the unexpressed grief of your ancestors.
Right. When you finally understand the mechanics of the secret, the illusion shatters. The invisible rules lose their power over you.
You stop walking around the invisible sinkhole. You can finally just walk across your own living room. We really encourage you to trust your own senses. If you've always felt that something was off or heavy in your family dynamic, trust that feeling. Reclaim your life's narrative from the silence.
The healing begins the exact moment you realize the secret isn't yours to keep.
This has been such a profound exploration. We are going to leave you with one final thought to mull over, something to explore on your own after you finish listening. If the invisible, oppressive rules of our families were written by ancestors who were just desperately trying to survive their own unimaginable pain— wait, let me rephrase that. If those rules were written by people just trying to survive, what new intentional rules could you